Hello, good evening, and welcome. It's another Wednesday night, and it's another Majority Show coming at you live on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. I'm your host, Mark Devlin, and I'm here tonight with my co-host, David Griffiths, and Mary Devlin. How are you both tonight? I should say one of you. How are you, David?
I'm all good. Busy as always with properties, and of course, fiendish plans to ensure the SNP is unable to mount any sort of comeback.
Oh, well, of course, that's important. Mary, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, thank you. Tonight I'm going to be talking about record immigration in Scotland.
Right, okay. And David, what are you going to be talking about?
Well, I'll be looking at the Labour government's initial policy decisions and the impact they've had thus far on council by-election results and popularity ratings.
Oh, well, I think it's a big issue of the moment. Okay, and we'll all be talking about Scottish Greens trying to blackmail the SNP into getting budget goodies, as well as, actually, we'll talk a little bit about today's Tory leadership contest. So we'll have, Mary.
And of course, we have Zoomer of the Week.
Right, okay, so we'll have all that and much, much more fairly soon. So come back and see us after these titles. Right, welcome back to the Majority Show, live every Wednesday. Our aim is a better Scotland without the toxic nationalism that has been strangling Scotland's potential, and still got a lot of work to do in that, even though SNP is on the decline. I'm here tonight with David and Mary. As always, a huge thanks to our friends at UK Union Voice and United Against Separation Facebook pages, where many of you are watching from tonight.
Indeed. And remember, sharing is caring. So the best thing you can do is to like the show on YouTube. Even if you don't subscribe, if you hit a like, that's very, very important. And if you can subscribe, please do so to increase the reach of the show at the click of one button.
And as usual, I'll be handling the relentless flow of comments, so please keep them short and snappy, and I'll try to put as many up on screen as I can.
Right, very good. So let's get started. First of all, let's have a quick chat about the leadership race for the Conservative Party, which results were announced earlier today. As we all know, Russell Findlay in Scotland was elected leader of the Scottish Conservatives. It's got off to a good start by saying that they would boycott any debate on Scottish independence. In Chamber, Findlay also announced his shadow cabinet and gave positions to his rivals in there, Megan Gallagher and Murdo Fraser.
Yep.
That's right. Now, Dave, do you think it's a good idea to give positions to his rivals?
Yeah, I genuinely do. If you remember, it was the opposite when Humza Yousaf became leader of the SNP. He shafted what's her name? Katie. What's her name? Yeah, and most notably, he didn't give her any kind of decent job offer, and so she, probably the most talented person in the SNP ranks, was on the back benches. It was ridiculous. So I think Russell Findlay has made a very sensible decision by including his rivals. If you look at the guys he's included, it's not just Megan and Murdo. He also gave a role to Liam Kerr, whom I always thought was quite talented, and additionally to Brian Whittle. Interestingly, Jamie Green missed out, and he's the only one of the initial 6 candidates who has missed out. But talking of the talented guys in their ranks, I'm delighted to see my good friend Tess White being made Shadow Equalities Minister. So well done, Tess. Fantastic. But yeah, I would say of the picks he's made, you wouldn't really complain about any of them. Liz Smith is in, who's also very talented. And it's just his deputy, I thought, was a tiny bit low key, Rachel Hamilton, because I don't really know very much about her. But well, good luck.
Yes.
But, and as for how he's doing so far, I mean, I think he has made a bright start. I think he is a sensible guy. He seems to be most clued in and linked in with traditional Conservative values, if you want to put it that way. He did seem a little tiny bit monotonous, maybe, which you find that in FMQs, that is. But you find that, I think, with guys who've focused on the written word rather than TV journalists who tend to be more articulate, obviously. But I think he'll get better. Now, he asked some sensible questions, and I think he is a credible leader. I think he's done well so far. So, yeah, no complaints.
Yeah, okay. Well, about today's leadership, this is what he had to say about it when I think he was being badgered a little bit to choose a candidate.
As I've said throughout the contest, I'm not backing any candidate because it's important that as a Scottish Conservative leader, I work respectfully with whoever does win the contest.
Do you think any of them will be any good for your party in Scotland?
I think we'll just have to wait and see the outcome and then work with whoever wins the contest.
But do you
It's a
think
fair democratic process.
Do you think either would be any good?
Well, we have to wait and see who wins. I mean, it's not for me, as I've made quite clear from the outset, not before we've reached the final two as we are now, I've made it quite clear that I will work with whoever wins, and they will do likewise, as they've also made clear.
But you can't tell me that you think either of them would be any good. Well, surely you would think both of them would be good.
Well, I mean, obviously we'll have to work together. I'm on the phone just now, as you can see.
Which one? Which one are you on the phone to?
Neither of them, and I've got to go and vote. But, you know, I very much appreciate your time.
James cleverly said the party needs to be more normal. Is this more normal?
Well, I think I can certainly say that I'm normal, Colin, so thank you.
Right, okay. Something about gotcha journalism there a little bit. Definitely, that seems like a reasonable answer, if non-committal, but I mean, that's part of politics, is it not? It says in here, Mark grumbles a bit about Murdo Fraser, but as we've already done that to some extent, I think we'll just leave that alone. We have to remains to be seen. I mean, you talk about Scottish Conservative shadow cabinet. It's, okay, it's not really going to happen at this point anyway. So I don't think it's too much worth worrying about in there now. Okay, let's talk about, in a general election, most people vote for the UK party, of course. And so leadership contest is important. And this afternoon, the leader in the race, James Cleverly, was eliminated, and leaving Robert Jenrick and Kemi Badenoch. So please, if you have a particular choice of those, from those, let's know who you think is best in the comments. Now, specifically as it pertains to Scotland, though, we don't really know too much about them. If you remember when the last Tory leadership took place, there was a kind of big tour, wasn't there, David, where they went around everywhere, and it was Liz Truss and Sunak, and who was the other one? Can't remember.
Was it what do you call her? Suella Braverman. Was it her?
No, I think so. No. I think it was Penny Mordaunt, maybe.
Well, maybe.
Yes, and so we assessed at that time the candidates according to how strong they would be against Scottish nationalism, and we came out. Liz Truss was definitely strongest in that case, although she didn't last very long. But it seems it's not such a big issue right now. Perhaps it's because of the SNPs in decline. Perhaps, maybe it's not. But
it's not so big because they're not in power. Last time there was a race, the Conservatives were in power.
Well, that's a good point, actually, isn't it?
But now Labour in power, so who is the leader of the Conservatives isn't so important.
Yeah, I mean, David, what do you think?
Well, true. I mean, not only the Conservatives no longer in power, the SNP's just had a bit of a drubbing in Scotland in the election also. But one thing I would say is, if you remember the last time when Liz Truss won the campaign, she came up to Scotland. She had a bit of a fight with Sturgeon. There was an issue very early on where she said something like she wasn't interested in talking to him because it wasn't a complaint that she hadn't phoned him. She said something like, "I'm not really interested, and they've got nothing to say to her." Something like that.
That's right.
And I remember that was the last time I was interviewed on Talk TV by the great Claudia Liza, and she obviously was trying to get me to say, "Yes, this is disgraceful." And I was saying, "No, I think she's quite right." Well, you really don't think that the UK Prime Minister should speak to the Scottish First Minister? No, not at all. Not that she's got something you to say. And so, interestingly, didn't have me on again after that. But they were just trying to say, isn't Liz Truss terrible? Well, whether she is or not, she's quite right to stand up to Sturgeon. And presumably this time, I guess the candidates are thinking, right, we better not do that again. We maybe just should give Scotland a little bit of a wide berth for now. I don't know. It's hard to say. But I would imagine that the leadership candidates didn't really want to start their potential time in charge of the party by coming up to Scotland and getting immediately embroiled in a big row with the SNP and with.
Well, I guess that is a point. Before the show came on, I had a look actually on Google. Yeah, Robert Jenrick, Scotland, for example, and I didn't see actually very much about his positions on Scotland or the breakup of the UK or the Union. Either, except I did see the only thing I found was a couple of articles from Scottish Tory MPs supporting him right? But I mean, that's that kind of thing. Scotland needs Robert Jenrick. I read it and there wasn't really anything extra in there that got me all interested in that. And as for Badenoch, though, of course, she seems to have a more higher profile in this issue. She said that she would deliver a once-in-a-generation undertaking if she won the leadership race, pledging a new blueprint for the great machine of our country. And this is a plan that looks at our international agreements, at the Human Rights Act, at the Equality Act, at judicial review and judicial activism, Treasury and Bank of England, at devolution and quangos, civil service and health service, blah, blah, blah. Seems a bit blah, 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 but no specific proposals there. I mean, have you actually, I mean, it has been quite a low-key contest so far, David. I mean, have you actually been paying much attention to it? It's okay if you have.
I'll be truthful with you. I paid far more attention to the Scottish election campaign. I think the UK Conservative Party leadership campaign pretty much reflected the status of the Conservative Party as it stands, in as much as these are probably the best candidates they could have got. And I think Badenoch has got some, definitely she's got some, would you say, persona. She is a quality candidate, I would say. The others, well, I mean, cleverly, I think he's a nice enough guy, and I wasn't that surprised he went out today. You see the machinations in any Conservative leadership election. You couldn't really say that every consecutive vote makes much sense, because you had Cleverly was nowhere, then he became first, now he's third, and all right, okay. And he apparently encouraged his voters to lend their support to Jenrick to get Tugendhat. Like, well, Tugendhat was 40-1. Why did he bother doing that? So they all seem a little bit naive to me. And I suspect the final two candidates, it looks like, are quite right-wing. And it would appear that the party membership is looking for a clear differentiation between the Conservative Party and the Lib Dems, to whom they're becoming a lot closer, and certainly to Labour. As for who win, it appears now that Kemi's odds on. She was 7-1.
Really?
Yes, 2 days ago she was 7-1. Now she's 8-11 or something. So you can't really. And in the general election, you could tell what was likely to happen by looking at the odds. In this, not a chance. You really can't. It's been very much fluctuating, spiking. One thing I would say, though, it would be very, very interesting if the Conservative Party elected its fourth female leader, and a woman of colour at that. While, of course, the Labour Party's got yet another middle-class white solicitor who lives in Highgate or whoever it is, Islington, as their leader, and they've never had a female leader, not once. So quite interesting. So it wouldn't surprise me if she gets the gig at all. But, of course, could the election of a right-wing leader pave the way for a potential Conservative reform coming together again? Because let's not forget, reform is just a breakaway from the Conservative Party anyway. So
yes, well, I think so. Not so much as a joining or like a pact or anything like that. I think basically the Tories have to get those voters back, and they have to appeal to them with policies that can be enacted, not just a laundry list of saying, here we a shopping list, or we will do this, we'll change all these things. But it's like, well, okay, how are you going to do that? How are you going to do the things you say you're going to do? Because they have, I think, while the Tories lost a lot of what's the word? Not momentum, but popular support, perhaps. Then I don't think it's entirely lost. Of course, they can get it back, and they've got a big ground operation. Whereas Reform, still to show that they've got anything serious coming up. Who knows the way that's going to go? Anyway, that's for a whole another discussion. Anyway, actually, according to this, so I've got some stats. Ipsos Mori says Jenrick has the highest percentage of Reform voters, saying he would make a good leader. And he's seen as the best leader according to Leave voters. And apparently he performs well with Lib Dem voters, for whatever that's worth. Okay, anyway, contest closes October 31st. Winner will be announced on November 2. So we're still a bit, I think there's a bit of time now to get to know the candidates, as they say. And to maybe there will be a Scotland visit among that. I don't know what the strategy is.
I'm sure there will be. I mean, to me, it's quite heartening that not one of them is even bothering to say, we're going to stop independence. They're quite right not to even to talk about it. But I mean, they haven't come to Scotland at all, so it's just interesting. But well, who knows? I mean, I guess they're just looking to their core support down there. Hard to say.
Well,
really.
I still think you've got to bolster your support wherever you are. That's the key thing for the Tory party right now. Bolster its core support and not put any more people off, and put the people who are wavering on, get them a bit more back on side.
Can I just ask, how has the voting been working so far? Has it mainly been up till now? Has it been at the MPs
Yes,
who are
it's
deciding?
people in the party.
And now it's going to go to the membership?
Yeah, and then it goes to the
Exactly
membership.
that.
Right. Okay, so that's that. Okay, we will be back in a second with going to talk about green budget. Can't even say that. Green budget blackmail. Right. Okay. So a few weeks ago, in a few weeks, we're going to be treated to a day when some Scottish people get together to do some very scary things. No, it is not Halloween, but the Scottish budget. Since the demise of the Bute House Agreement, Scottish Greens are out of the government, though, and as a minority administration, SNP have to do all the hard work themselves, but they need some support to pass their budget. The support of other parties, it says. Now, they've been going around trying to get more support. Ivan McKee actually got this today. Yes. Ivan McKee going around talking with political rivals. I don't know how well that's going to go. But the Greens are a bit hot and cold on this budget. So they won't support it for two reasons. First of all, is they're angry about what the SNP has been up to since they left. It's like spurned, since they were spurned at the altar, whatever it is. SNP have said cutting key climate and active travel funding, bike lanes. So cut
Lanes, yeah.
on a commitment to expand free school meals. I think I was going to go to free school meals to every kid or something like that, wasn't it?
Yes.
And to ban so-called conversion therapy, which isn't actually conversion therapy.
No, it's not. There was a misnomer, you're right.
Therapy. Right. Anyway, so Lorna Slater said, under the Bute House Agreement, in exchange for our support, we got a whole bunch of policies and 2 ministers. Now that stuff is being chipped away at and we're no longer part of it. There should be no assumptions on the part of the SNP that we will be willing to support a budget. She says, who are they expecting to support the budget? Because I can't believe they think they can cut gore green things and come to us and ask for our votes for support. Who is going to support it, basically? David Who is going to support it. They're so upset. But they sound a bit miffed.
I would say they most definitely are. Butthurt, as we used to say, Butthurt. But bear in mind it was Humza Yousaf who shafted them rather than Honest John, of course. So maybe he's a little bit more emollient, so they might feel a little more inclined. I don't know. Unlikely. And they definitely do bear a very sizable grudge. You can see that. And there's nobody more hurt than a supposed progressive who is full of integrity and just wants to do the right thing. Then 2 minutes later says, you sacked me, so I'm not going to vote for you, you bastard. You know, that's how deep their integrity runs. But remember, the odds, the numbers as things stand, assuming Ash Regan votes with the SNP, or votes against the SNP because she's now Alba, that gives them still 63. And the combined total of everybody else, remembering that Alison Johnson, the presiding officer, doesn't get a vote, that means it's 63 against a maximum of 65. All it takes is Ash Regan voting with the government, and that's it, it's tied. And then, of course, the presiding officer would vote with the government also, because that's what tradition demands. So it's very unlikely they're going to lose this vote, because it would take all of the Greens voting against them and Ash Regan voting against them. Is that really going to happen? Are they going to line up and vote with the hated Tories? I don't know. They might.
Yeah, it seems a bit weird, and especially now time has gone past. Time's a healer.
Yeah,
as they say. And anyway, the second part, of course, though, is that they want concessions for any new budget. Ross Greer in the papers this week was saying the Greens would not support it unless it targeted big business.
Yeah,
and this includes business rates relief being reviewed with a demand for larger firms to contribute more, a cruise ship levy, and a private jet tax.
What was that? A cruise ship levy?
Yeah, cruise ship. Not levy, Mary. Levy.
I said levy.
I thought he's got the toilet paper out already.
Exactly.
No,
Oh,
he says
David,
anyway.
talk about
Now he's all hot for it. He's saying we're ready to cooperate again if the SNP will join us in taking the bold decisions needed to tackle child poverty and the climate crisis. Blah 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 blah. And anyway, so I mean, but what do you think of this? This nonsense. I mean, this is just like a list of demands, and I mean they're kind of feeble in a way, really. But it's a bit like, I mean, toddlers, asking for more, or what's his name? Oliver Twist. Can I have a bit more?
More exactly.
It's a bit desperate.
It does look that way. I mean, they haven't said anything about any more progressive income tax rises, for example. So why not, guys? I thought that's what everyone in Scotland wanted. They didn't mind paying a little bit more for all these wonderful baby boxes and everything else, and free paracetamol. So yeah, it does seem like they're just whining.
Well, I think that's a very good point there. I mean, it's all like stuff at the edges, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's nothing that's really substantial. It's nothing that says, you really need to reform this budget and make it work, for example. I mean, let's say that, but it's just, we want this wee goodie.
Yes.
Treats.
Yeah, treats.
Treats is right.
Yeah.
Tickle under the chin, that's what they want. Yep.
They're treats for them, but they're not necessarily treats for the rest of us. The cruise ship tax, for example.
Yeah.
I mean, how much money is this going to raise versus how much it would lose? Probably it just takes one cruise ship to say no, or cruise line to say no, we're not doing that anymore, to end up with tens of thousands of people not coming to Scotland and spending lots of money.
Exactly.
They don't think that far.
No,
they don't think to the next step. They only think the first step will tax them. They don't.
Exactly. As soon as anyone talks about coming to Scotland, they say, "Oh, can we have a tourist tax on those people then?" Oh, it's unbelievable, isn't it? We are not just England's plaything or England's playground for rich English people to come up. Well, what the hell are we in that case? How are you going to attract? What kind of tourists is it you want to attract? Not rich English people. Well, great.
Well, I mean, we're talking here for cruise ships. We're talking Europeans, Americans, and
the rest of the
international
world.
Tourists as well. And they're going to. It's very easy for a cruise ship just to say no. We can't bother to go in there. If it's going to cost us an extra £1 million, just say, for example.
Paul Halford. I don't know where Paul lives, but he says where I live, we get 240 cruise ships a year in.
Right, I think he's on Orkney, right? So there's, so some places there are a lot. Now, there's whether people want them in the local area or not is a slightly different matter. But you're going to tax them. You're just going to, put people off. Now, the private jet tax, though, I think is a bit more worrying in a sense that it seems to be specifically directed at one person. Of course, that person is Donald Trump, and. Basically, they're saying that he would pay every time he visited in his plane. He would pay £250,000 for the privilege.
So they're basically going to fine him for coming to Scotland, right?
Well, that's a good point there, Mary. You're up good with the good points today. So basically, there is the plan in line. He's going to pay $250,000 each time he comes there. Now, some people say he should just land in at the border and then get the bus up.
Trump bus.
But exactly as Mark Zegfeld says there, Scotland's close for business. We combine that. So I meant to mention also Ross Greer being so happy about the Lomond Banks development, which was going to be built basically in a car park in an area that was already developed of Loch Lomond. But no, that wasn't good enough. It had to go. Now, this private jet tax, it says, Greer says, this just shows you, this is small petty mindedness of it. It says a private jet tax would raise money for our public services, but its real aim would be to keep the super rich and their destructive toys on the ground. It would, of course, excuse me, it would, of course, have the added bonus of keeping the notorious tight and cash-strapped Donald J. Trump out of Scotland. That's a gift you couldn't even begin to put a price tag on. I think the targeting of private citizens by any government is wrong.
Criminal.
Yeah, I think that is wrong. So whether you like Trump or not, I mean, because basically if the government can target a private citizen like Trump, then they can target you just as well. Just because they don't like you, they make a tax specifically against you. That's not really the way government should be operating. It's not petty vendettas and so on. And also, you think it's just sour grapes as a policy, David?
100%. It's the politics of resentment, envy, and hatred. It's because they hate Trump. That's why they're thinking about this. What they haven't thought about, of course, is I live in the Ayrshire coast, where you get every few years a massive golf tournament which brings hundreds of thousands of people, tens of millions of pounds of revenue. Most of those golfers use private jets. You do know that, Ross, right? Probably not. He's probably thinking, I don't want these planes coming over because I hate golf and I could never play it. So, that's about the level of his thinking on this. It's ludicrous. You're going to charge, say, Bob McIntyre £250,000 to fly home. Yeah, what a great idea. Anyway, but the Scottish Greens hate, as we know, to see any successful private sector enterprise. That's why they hate the private rental sector. And they detest the hospitality sector, because that means people might live where they want and go and drink what they want. And those issues and those conditions threaten state control over those people. That's why they don't like them. And as for Trump, like you said, all he would do is take Air Force One to Dublin and then commandeer an Aer Lingus flight and come here. That's all he would do. It's just ludicrous. It will never work. But
actually, they have the ability to raise this tax. I don't know, is it a reserved issue?
Oh, that's a good point, actually. I mean, you certainly can't say, I presume you could say when it comes to a Scottish airport, certainly Prestwick is nationalised, isn't it? So I presume you could charge what you like there. But if they started thinking about putting landing charges on Prestwick Airport, Ryanair would go straight out the door. I guarantee you that, knowing Ryanair. So you can't just do this. You can't pick and choose because you don't like a single individual person that's aimed at. That is just the politics of idiocy, frankly. But I mean, let's face it, Ross Greer's never going to outmaneuver Donald Trump if he loves to be 100. I mean, it's just petty frivolity from a discredited party of oddballs.
Well, this is the thing. We've got these oddballs and they're dictating policy. They have dictated policy in SNP when they were in government, and now they're dictating the policy when they're out of government. If there ever was we've talked about this before, proportional representation has foisted these people upon us. They were barely voted in to begin with. None of them won a constituency.
None of them even close to winning a constituency, and certainly not one of them got even close to being garnering the most votes in any of the regional lists. They got 8 seats from 8% of the vote. That's it. 8% of the vote, 8 seats. Wow. Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, it's like we've got this. This is the problem. These barely elected people holding the balance of power because of this broken system, and then dictating whatever they want to. And then the SNP are far too weak to stand up to them. It says here, just in my notes, there were actually a surprising number, 12,911 private flights to and from Scotland's airports, probably mainly to the Gulf, I would imagine.
I would have thought that there's a lot of flights as well, might be corporate business people.
Yes,
absolutely, there will be.
So if you were thinking of coming to invest in Scotland, if you were high up some corporation and you're thinking, well, maybe we should invest in Scotland, and then you see the tax you're going to have to pay on your private jet, just say, let's just go somewhere else.
Well, I've said for a long time that if you're saying, okay, we can put our new factory in Carlisle, and you can get taxed at normal UK rates, or dear executives, we can go just in the Scottish side, and you'll be taxed. You lose thousands of pounds a year in salary. What's the decision they're going to make? I mean, the decision they're going to make, of course, is to not invest in Scotland, and that's what's been happening here. Anyway, of course, they claim it's about pollution. Really, it's about punishing the wealthy. How dare they? How dare they make money and provide goods that all of us use? It's shocking. Anyway, if Trump becomes president, perhaps he should say that he won't do deals with the UK unless devolution is rolled back, and losers like Greer are deprived of their meddling jobs. That would be quite amusing. Make Scotland great again. That should be his get a hat with that on it. Then we'd be good. Get rid of them. Anyway, apparently, we don't think this is going to happen, but if Swinney can't get a budget passed, it's going to be an election. Swinney, he said, this was good. I thought this was quite ridiculous. He says, I don't think members of the public want politicians to be having elections when they're not supposed to be. That's almost Zoomerish material. That is. He says,
in the next breath, did he say, and we want a referendum tomorrow? Yeah.
Well, that's very good. That's good points. Oh, a lot of good points coming out today.
That's what we're here for, Mark.
Well, that's good. I'm impressed.
That's what we get paid the big bucks for.
Of the co-hosts here. This is great stuff. All right. Anyway, will the Greens fall in line, David?
My suspicion is they will. I mean, I've been through the numbers already. All it takes is one of them to flip, and that's it. Can you really see the Greens voting with the hated Conservatives and Labour against their fellow nationalists? It just seems a wee bit unlikely to me. Plus, of course, you can imagine the pleasure that Big Lorna and wee Paddy would get by watching the SNP squirming at having to accede to some Green demands to adopt items from their twisted anti-business agenda. But it's not by any means definite, because you can hear how hurt she is, Lorna, in that interview. One political commentator said this week it's not even 50-50 that the Greens will back the SNP budget. One thing to bear in mind, it's possibly a little unlikely, but recent opinion polls, I think I went through the numbers last week, had the Greens on 10 with the SNP well down and Conservatives well down. So the Greens might take the view, well, if we get an election now, 10% of the vote would probably get us more seats. Whereas if we wait until 2026, you really don't know what's going to happen. But my gut feel is that the Greens, having had that taste of power, they will not want to give up one last shot at being able to shape Holyrood policy just one last time. So in essence, they'll either back it or
yes, of course.
Yep.
The bike lanes must continue. That's the way it goes.
Indeed.
We can all starve, but as long as we can look at the gaze out on those empty bike lanes, we shall be happy that
what was that? The gays are out in the bike lanes.
Well, as long as we can gaze out in empty bike lanes, the population shall be happy and say our masters know what's best for us. Anyway, the green tail is still wagging. SNP Doug says here. So let's take a break and we will come back to David's going to be talking about opinion polling and Labour and whatever. All that type of stuff.
Well,
he's really good at talking about.
Indeed.
Hey, you're up.
I'm up. Okay, so good people. I just wanted to talk briefly about the impact on opinion polls and local council by-elections of the first few months of what I guess you would still term the fledgling Labour government. So remember, guys, this year saw the first elected Labour Westminster government since Blair's last election victory in 2005. So it's been 19 years. So in that time, you would have thought that Labour Party has had plenty of time to plan its strategy once it was in office, particularly so as the result of this year's election was widely expected in every opinion poll for the 2 years previously. During the election campaign, you'll remember this, guys, I almost pleaded with the incoming Labour government, because it was clear it was going to be a Labour government, not to do anything too controversial and not to enact any unpopular legislation, at least until after the 2026 Holyrood election, because they just finally, for the first time since 2010, got ahead of Labour in an election. Labour got ahead of the SNP in Scotland, and so it didn't make any sense just to hand the initiative straight back to them. But of course, what happened is it looks very much like they've front-loaded, as they say, the controversial policies to put them all out first, to say, well, of course, we had to do this because of the £22 billion black hole. A very difficult decision. They always use those two phrases whenever they talk about the cut in winter fuel allowance. And they have all the things to do, really, to cut OAP fuel allowance. It's just the most un-Labour-like thing, policy to adopt. But plus, as I've mentioned before, we're additionally seeing what very much looks like two-tier policing and or sentencing. And of course, there are endless tales of Labour MPs seemingly taking handouts eagerly from donors. Some of the stuff these guys have been taking, you just wonder, really, is there an ounce of political instinct in this party? But I guess the thinking is, less so with the gifts and stuff, but certainly with the unpopular policies, the thinking is that presumably by 2029, the impact of highly unpopular moves will have been diminished. Now, there is some precedent for this strategy. Let's not forget, 1979, Thatcher was elected after 5 years of a Labour government. Immediately, she came straight out of the blocks with ending government support of loss-making nationalised industries like coal mines and steel industry, and very strict control of the money supply. So it was called monetarism. There was almost no money in circulation, so everyone was skinned. Within months, 3 million people were unemployed, and her government's popularity went down, plumbing new depths. The SDP was formed. I remember those four guys who broke away from the Labour Party because the Labour Party had elected Michael Foot as their leader, and there was no way he was going to get elected. So it looked like the SDP was going to win. They were miles clear in early opinion polls. Then, of course, in 82 came the Falklands War, a wave of patriotism swept the UK, and Thatcher was actually able to call an election 1 year early. That's how much she turned it round, and in which she won a landslide. And we see some echoes of that in Starmer's first few weeks, only in as much as he's followed her in having his popularity slumping. So for a guy who had a positive popularity rating just ahead of the election to fall already to minus 30% after just less than 3 months, that's kind of standard for halfway through a parliamentary term, but it's not standard for less than 3 months in, I can guarantee you. So what do you think, Mark? Do you think this is what's behind it? Is he burying the really bad stuff early on, in your opinion?
Well, if you follow that logic, then the clear answer is that he has to go and start a war. So basically,
Yes.
and that's I mean that has been a policy for governments all across the world to raise their popularity against an external enemy. A war may happen anyway, irrespective of what he wants or not. I mean, I suppose just to go back, funnily enough, he invoked the Falklands War today, and he said that his uncle, I think, was torpedoed or something, or a torpedo went by the ship or whatever. So he has a personal stake in it. But, so, I mean, patriotism sells, I suppose, does quite well. Now, we'll talk about the actual thing. Now, Daz earlier on said, we tactical voting, so, lol. Right. Well, the point of tactical voting was we knew it was going to be hard. I keep saying this every week. We knew it was going to be hard. It's not easy. Of course, Labour's going to come in. If you're a Tory voter, Labour's going to come in, and they're going to be bad. It's going to be doubly bad because you're not really not in tune with them in your heart anyway. Right. Yeah. But that's not the point. The point is to get rid of the SNP, and that's why we still have to continue to tactically vote in the next election like that.
And we always said it would be hard to swallow.
Yes. Indeed. Yeah, and it's true. I mean, and just to pick up on the stuff of popularity ratings, it's very traditional, and in council by-elections as well, it's very traditional. Once a government's got into its stride, maybe there's some of the traditional unhappiness you identify with reigning governments when they're a couple of years in, but normally you call it a honeymoon period.
Yes.
You don't get a massive majority, and then within 2 weeks suddenly be slumping to be the most unpopular level you've ever been.
I think it's very poor. It's been, I mean, to answer that point, I think it's been very poorly managed.
Yeah.
I mean, what they should have done, I think, is they should have come up with a 100-day program and say, well, this is what we're going to do in these 100 days, and these are the let's say 5 things they have to do, and this is what we're going to do, and thought about that all bit in advance. But there doesn't seem to be any of that. Perhaps things will tighten up because they've realised how poorly the public has seen this.
Poorly the public has accepted this, and so just talk very quickly about local elections. Since the general election, the parties, each of the parties, in terms of their how they've fared in council elections, by-elections since the general election, the Conservatives have a net gain of 3. Liberal SNP and Greens have a net gain of 3 seats. Liberal Democrats have lost 3 seats, and Labour have lost 6 seats. It's very, very early on to be chipping council seats. It really is. And the question has to arise: does Starmer lack political judgment? Is he being poorly advised? Sue Gray has just gone. Was he wise in taking her on, given that she used to? Didn't she work for Boris Johnson, or had compiled a report into Boris Johnson? Then she came out as this big Labour figure.
Yes.
Weird, and some of this, some of the coincidences, if you like. Morgan McSweeney's now taken over from Sue Gray. He's the husband of Imogen Walker, who has no connection with Scotland, but is now the MP for Hamilton and Clyde Valley.
Yes.
Wasn't that nice?
She's our MP.
Exactly right. So really, guys, it just looks terribly cliquish. It doesn't look like a traditional Labour thing, unless it's maybe going back to the days when Corbyn was getting all his money.
I mean, how are they going to turn this around? Are they going to produce a budget that's going to be people are going to be really happy with? People don't generally get really happy budgets. Do you? Is this the kind of thing that makes you happy? You go, oh, that was a great budget. I'm really going to vote for these people now. I don't think that's the way it works. I mean, what happens is that people have ongoing policies and things like that, and they work the media. I don't see where's Starmer working in the media. I don't see it, and he doesn't seem to be in control. You might expect to, at least if he looks like a middle manager, he would be able to manage. But he's not. He doesn't seem to be able to manage it very well. We'll see. I mean, it's still early days, but this is like a honeymoon from hell.
Yeah,
I guess
exactly.
In that sense,
it's true. One of the other podcasts, I think it was Bernard Ponson being Alex Massey. They made the point that normally a government is on the front foot and saying, this is what we're going to set out to do. These guys have just been reacting to events since day one, and that's really, really unusual. For them to be so bereft of ideas so early on, it's a little worrying. Anyway, but the question I have to, I'll just finish on this point, is Starmer aware of how he's being received? Really, it's hard to say, but could it be that he is quite happy with it, but he's thinking, well, the big thing is that I win a second term. So if that means we don't win in Cardiff and we don't win in Edinburgh in a couple of years, I'll take that. Because maybe he doesn't want to be solely a party of government in both Westminster and in the old regional assemblies. It's possible. I can't really see why, but who knows? Well, I guess we'll
I
find
think we'll have
later.
to see. I mean, you have to see whether events will make the man.
Yeah,
as it were, because
indeed.
I think that ultimately maybe you can go. They can do policies and you can massage policies. Just thinking about it, if events do happen and he's not on top of them, that's when people really be like, oh no, this is no good. And we'll see how. I mean, with the world, we'll still get the Iran attacks and come up.
Sure.
Who knows if that's going to escalate? It's just who knows. That's the big question mark. There's Russia, Donald Trump. There's a whole lot of stuff coming together. Maybe not in a good way, maybe in a good way. I know. Okay, so we're going to take a break. We're going to come back with Mary, and we're going to be talking about new immigration numbers that were just released yesterday, something like that. So let's have a look at that. Back in a second. Actually, I forgot to do the donation message. So, Mary, right, if you like the show, please donate. It helps us keep going. We're trying to get ready for 2026, or maybe even an earlier election. Every donation helps. You put a £5 in, that's great. If you put £2 in, even, it's great. But more, wonderful. It's great. But we love every donation. And if you don't want to donate, you can always buy a T-shirt. Look at the fantastic Majority T-shirts and stuff in the Majority shop. Now you can donate at our website, or you can put a super sticker, super thanks on YouTube. We don't want begging for stuff, so we don't really mention it that much through the show. But we appreciate it, and it keeps us going, and everything helps.
Keeps the lights on.
That's right. We'd see these lights. The lights. Now, Mary.
I look as if I'm sitting in darkness. So do you, Mark. So.
Right, that's okay. So please donate more money so that Mary can get a light behind her. So it makes.
I need a light back here.
Right, there we go. That's Mary's light fund. Now let me just get your caption here, Mary, so I can find it.
Right, Mark. If you're ready with my comments and my caption.
It's always in a weird place. Your caption. No, that's the problem.
Well, sorry about that.
Oh, here we go.
I'm way down the list.
You're ready. Okay,
so Scotland has recorded its fastest population growth since the 1940s.
Right.
So just coming up on 80 years since we've had population growth like this. The country's population was just under 5.5 million last June, according to the National Records of Scotland. That's up 43,100 in a year, a 0.8% increase, and the biggest jump in 1 year since 1946-47. Almost 2/3 of people moving to Scotland came from outside the UK, with the top countries of origin being India.
Oh, really?
But they had 250,000 immigrants coming from.
Really?
That's to the UK.
I didn't check because I didn't read this before.
Look at the numbers. Okay, so people coming from India to the UK is just over 250,000. From Nigeria, we've got 141,000, which is pretty high, I think.
Right.
China, 89,000. Pakistan, 55,000, and Ukraine, 35,000.
Wow.
So, I mean, I when I was looking at these numbers, I read something that says it was mostly students, but I'm not buying that. I don't think all these Nigerians are students, and maybe the Chinese are, and maybe a lot from India.
A lot of Indians will be, yeah.
Yeah, but Ukraine 35,000.
Well, those are refugees. I guess refugees from Ukraine. It seems reasonable.
Yeah, so some of those are refugees. I don't know why there are so many people from India. Anyway, the SNP say that we need immigration because deaths outnumber births, with 19,000 more people dying than being born.
Yeah.
And they often claim that Scotland is more welcoming to immigration than those south of the border are. Christy Blackman even claimed that immigration to Scotland would be unlimited in the event of Indy or breaking the UK. They would have unlimited immigration. That would be great. And Westminster leader Stephen Flynn has repeatedly insisted that targeting small boats in the Rwanda policy was not Scotland's values.
Mm-hmm.
But the end of May earlier this year, new research revealed Scots want less migrants coming north of the border.
Mm-hmm.
The survey found that almost half of Scots want to reduce the flow of migrants, and 25% wanted immigration reduced substantially.
Oh.
So politicians are in favour, but the people are not in
Well,
favour.
the politicians are usually in favour because they see them as voters. That's why, as people will vote for them. If you say to people, right, I'll let you in the country, and then it's a kind of quid pro quo that obviously the people, then they'll get their vote later on. Whereas if people, let's just say the Tories haven't stopped immigration, but let's just say use that anyway. Let's just say, and they said no, we're not going to let anyone in. Then obviously immigrants are not going to vote for that, and families of immigrants, and so on and so on. But
it's like the Democrats in the USA.
Well, it's terrible. It's really
they're just letting people
there.
flood in because they believe that people will, if they do that those people will vote for them.
And they're specifically bringing them into the swing states to tip the balance.
Yeah.
And if you
change the
follow Elon Musk's tweets, he is quite big on that whole thing there as well. I was kind of surprised so many Indians. I wonder what they're doing now. They're always talking about people coming to support the NHS, but actually it's not as much as you would think. I had the numbers before across the UK. It's like 1 million people. Let's say 1 million people immigrated in the year, but it was only like 40,000 or something were went to the NHS. Now, a lot other ones are for all kinds of other stuff.
Yeah.
And who knows really what it is? I think this is part of it. People are like, well, who are these people? Why are they here?
Well, why are Nigerians here?
Well, I think because they made a special program for the Nigerians, especially to bring them over, and many of them bring over their families. In the old day, it was hard for people who are outside the EU to come in because of EU restrictions, I think, and now it's a bit easier because of I don't think Nigeria's in the Commonwealth, but now it's a bit easier.
Yeah, I don't know why.
So many Nigerians. Lots of Indians are carers. Now, one thing is quite one thing I noticed, if you travel on a bus in Glasgow, for example, it's just full of immigrants, and it's very obviously full of immigrants in the bus. People from all different nationalities, it seems. And I don't travel on the bus much, but it's quite surprising when you see it. You're like, well, what's going on here? And I know that that's anecdote and it's not data, but the data supports that lots of people are coming in, and we don't know where they're going. What was that thing? There was a report that said 1 in 100 people could be illegal immigrant in the UK.
Yeah. Nigeria is part of the Commonwealth, has been since 1960, apparently. Just checking.
Oh, is it? That's probably.
Well, I mean, we haven't talked about the impact on services.
Well, that's
with all these immigrants coming in, we've got a housing emergency.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying they caused a housing emergency. There is a housing emergency, and we're letting all these immigrants coming in. We've got NHS emergency as well. There's extra traffic on the roads. The roads can't cope with it either. And we're still letting more and more people come in. It's like, if you can't deal with what you've got already, why would you let?
Well, I mean, if you look at that number there, you said the number was 46,000 people came into Scotland, right? That's the size of a major town, right? Same size, I think, something like Hamilton's the biggest, biggest town, but it's that type of level, a big town like Ayr or something like that. Yeah. That's a lot of people, a lot of extra
in 1 year.
Push on services. Now, this is about where we always do the disclaimer. We were immigrants. Mary and myself were immigrants. We lived in Japan for 18 years in the States. So we know what it's like to go to a foreign country and work there. This is the thing, right? But the Americans make it extremely hard for you to stay in the country.
Yep.
And you can't go on benefits when you're
no
there at all, nothing like that.
Nothing.
So we have. I mean, this is a very interesting numbers, I think, and I think this idea that people say, oh well, there's they're here to do the jobs, as someone pointed out there. Well, there's high unemployment anyway, so why aren't Scots doing the jobs? And surely we should be training them rather than bringing in people from other countries. We don't know what's going on, and especially en masse. I don't think anyone's against limited immigration or making it quite hard for people, but this still seems to be out of control. David, you think same?
Well, yeah, I mean, for sure. What you would term right-wing commentators quite often state very openly that the reason the UK needs so many immigrants is because they can't afford to pay people who are Indigenous the going rate, the minimum wage, whereas immigrants, it is felt, will accept lower wages. Remember when Brexit took place and everyone said, who's going to pick the strawberries? I mean, it was such a bizarre occupation to pick up. We know that some people are clearly not being paid the minimum wage. If you look at any sporting event or any music event, the security staff are always primarily overseas-based people of colour. They can barely speak the language. You can't tell me these people are being paid minimum wage. They're not getting that job because
Yes,
they're the best
exactly.
They're taking those jobs, or being given those jobs because it's cheap labour. Let's just be honest. That's what's happening, and this is what.
That's what they need to crack down on.
Of course they do. It's ridiculous. You can't do this because you're almost relaxing the checks and the security measures you have to put in place to make sure that people are actually okay to work for you. And you can't do it if it's just because they're cheap. It's happened for years. I worked in IT consultancy, and I remember the last consultancy I had, an airline, they said to me, I was the only guy who wasn't Indian in the department by the end, and they said to me, look, you've got to understand, I have to pay you 3 times what I pay these people. I can get 3 people to do what you do, and they're not as good as you, but they're cheaper. So what can I do? I get it, mate. But that's what it is. I mean, they weren't illegal. They were perfectly all right to be in the country. But if you're going to bring in migrant workers and pay them a third of the going rate, that's how it's going to be from now on. If you're going to carry on doing that, it will mean that people in this country don't have the capability.
Well, it just seems like an easy solution rather than looking at the underlying issues. Low birth rate, for example, is another thing. You're going to see much more about this coming up.
Yeah.
As you say, why do we have low birth rates? Why are we letting in immigrants with high birth rates, and so on, and causing issues of trying to deal with things? And the problem is that there's some people want to make almost criminalize even having this type of discussion. And you say, "Oh, everything's great. Yeah, everything's great. People coming in are great, and all that." And okay, it's great. You get more. Okay, great. You get more food options, whatever, right? But there's generally an increase in crime and so on, and it happens throughout history and so on. We've had waves of immigration of all different kinds, and it's the same pattern all the time. You get the good, you get the bad, but at least we should have a discussion about it.
Well, absolutely right. Go on, Mary.
Sorry, I was going to say you just touched on crime there. So the immigration numbers, finding out that there are hundreds of foreign criminals are living in Scotland when they should have been deported. The 635 people have been served deportation orders after being convicted for crimes including violence and fraud, among them sex offenders and shoplifters.
Is that a recent statistic? Is that from this week, that statistic?
Yes.
Wow.
635 people who are criminals are supposed to be deported, and they're not getting deported.
Well, I know that in Japan, certainly, if you commit a crime, you've been the first plane.
Yeah, they just get in a plane.
Well, after you do your sentence, and then you get kicked out. Or half your sentence, and you have to do the rest of your sentence back at home. Anyway, whatever. All right, good segment there. It's the issue of the time, but I suppose we'll see how Labour actually deal with this. We're not with high hopes of that anyway, but well, that's that. Okay, things you can do right now to support the show. You can buy a t-shirt or a mug from the shop. You can subscribe to the show on YouTube. That's great. Your YouTube numbers need to go up. You can tell your friends about us, and you can do all of the above, which makes us extremely happy and fulfilled. Underlined exclamation mark. Coming up, it's a moment you have all been waiting for, the highlight of the week. It is Zoomer of the Week.
Yay.
Yay. Right, okay, where are we with this? Right, as regular viewers know, we've been advocating for the abolition of Holyrood and the restoration of powers back to local authorities and to the UK government where appropriate. Local authorities, of course, have seen their budget slashed and their spending priorities distorted by a centralising Scottish government. And for example, while Glasgow City Council received plenty of money for bike lanes, it was starved of cash for teachers and libraries. Correct. A point which my Zoomer, Susan Aitken, who is the head of Glasgow City Council, inadvertently made last year. Now Susan's all upset because she didn't get an invite to Keir Starmer's Council of the Nations and Regions. It's the first gathering of this new body, which was promised in Labour's election manifesto to encourage more cooperation between UK government and the devolved nations and regions. Aitken, who is, well, let's see, we've got a wee picture of it. Right, okay, I'll put this way up.
You don't need a picture of her, Mark.
No, not a picture of her.
Oh, good.
There we go. That's a snubbing. All right. Okay. Aitken, not the most self-aware person, said Keir Starmer and his team talked up this new council as some sort of a big reset of the UK government's relationship with local leaders. We've been promised change. We've been promised respect. But Labour's first decision has been to shut the door on Glasgow. Not that she's shut the door on Glasgow. There's a dump. It's extraordinary, she says, that Starmer's bringing England's local leaders to a meeting in Scotland, but not allowing any of their Scottish counterparts to join them around the table. Well, Susan, it's not really extraordinary at all. Read the sign. Council of the Nations and Regions. Aside from Starmer, the meeting includes the first mayors of Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, plus 11 metro mayors who represent city regions in England.
Yep.
For example, Sadiq Khan, the mayor of London, and Andy Burnham, mayor of Greater Manchester, plus some other smaller ones. So you see, Susan, you can't get in because the centralising SNP won't let you in. The SNP won't let you in and they won't devolve further. In fact, Labour is the one that's going to devolve more, and Labour is the one that wants to do these city mayors. If Susan does want Glasgow represented better, I'll be quite happy to join her in a campaign to abolish Holyrood and get real local devolution back to local authorities. Maybe then she can join the Council of Nations and Regions as a mayor, elected mayor, with no barrier in the way in the form of the Scottish Government. But until then, perhaps she could shut her whiny mouth. Anyway, she's my Zoomer.
Very good. Right.
I mean, this is the thing. I think now we're going to see this devolution, in a way, proper devolution to English regions.
Right.
Probably the way it should have been set up, not parliaments, but how do we assign spending? And they can fight for spending, but not waste their time sitting there talking about transgender folk and whatever other issues, green issues they've got, bottle return deposit scheme, and all the other laws that have been blocked or reversed.
It's a meeting for the adults.
Well, I don't think they're particularly adults, but it just means, I think it's actually, in a way, it's quite good because maybe it puts a bit of a break on the idea that Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland are the devolved powers, but there's a whole load of other ones now. So their voice isn't quite as strong, perhaps. If only the Labour government takes more action to devolve further, that would be great, of course. Anyway, Susan Aitken, for being whining about stuff that's not even in your remit. I mean, really. Mm-hmm. Right, okay, administrative devolution, exactly, Stephen.
Well said.
That's what we talk about. And if you would like to read more of Stephen's articles on the Majority website, we have a whole load of them on constitutional issues. You can tell the difference between legislative and administrative devolution. Next up, it's going to be David, I believe. Yes, David is coming up with his Zoomer.
Yep. Okay, people, not for the first time, my Zoomer this week is Humza Yousaf. Now, as is now habitual for Scotland's former First Minister, Humza made himself look ridiculous on more than one issue this week. First, evidence emerged of a WhatsApp conversation between Humza and Scotland's former clinical director, I believe he was called, Jason Leach, back in 2021. And in this conversation, Humza revealed yet again his obsession with his most hated sporting entity, Rangers Football Club. It came about after, you'll remember, I'm sure, Humza had found a video purportedly showing Rangers players in the dressing room singing songs with some very questionable content. And he retweeted it eagerly, saying, if this is true, and if Rangers players are singing anti-Catholic sentiment, they should all be shown the door. What he failed to check on, of course, was that the video had been posted by a tweeter named Wully Wanker, and it was
was that his real name, David?
Who knows? If so, he's probably Humza's best mate. Let's be honest, So Humza, of course, before he even looked into past sentence on it. Anyway, in a conversation a few weeks later with Mr. Leach, it appears, and I guess this is from a Freedom of Information request, Humza confirmed that he had got pissed off at the BBC today as they asked me all this crap about Rangers in the video, just rehashing the usual crap. In other words, Humza was objecting to having been caught spreading lies about the football club he detests. So sorry about that, Humza, old chap. Next time, maybe keep your idiot gob shut. Also this week, Humza was asked, when Israel was attacking Hezbollah in Lebanon, Humza was asked what the experience was like when his in-laws were trapped in Gaza. An odd question. And he replied...
Is that what this video is?
That's what the video is. Go for it.
Okay.
I mean, finally, we're seeing people fleeing Lebanon, including British citizens. Your in-laws were trapped in Gaza. What was that experience like?
Well, I hope those in Lebanon certainly get more help from the Foreign Secretary than my family got from the previous Foreign Secretary and the previous UK government. And what I would say is, look,
they got them out.
Yeah, got them out.
They got them out, and they weren't supposed to be there.
Well, it's ungrateful. I told you this is the most ungrateful family in Scotland.
Absolutely right. Only last November, Humza praised the UK Foreign Office for its help in getting his in-laws out of Gaza. Now he's saying we got no help at all. Really? So let me guess, Humza, did you phone somebody in Hamas and say, let my people out, would you mind? Is that what happened? You tell us, Humza, if it wasn't the Foreign Office, then who did get your in-laws out of Gaza, which was at the time a war zone? Please, we'd love to know. Anyway, whatever the truth...
I think, okay, go ahead.
I think instead of Zoomers, we should have Ungrateful of the Week.
Right, indeed.
Oh, he would win it every week.
There's a lot of contenders.
But no, that was it. So just as...
Well, it's not just that. I mean, they have these pro-Hamas events.
Yes.
Or pro-Iran events is what they really are, right?
Supposedly, and pro-Iran, yeah.
Basically pro-Iran events on the anniversary of the day that the Hamas invaded Israel and killed 1,200 people, most of whom were civilians, just people at a festival.
Absolutely right.
Not combatants or anything like that. If you watched any of the videos, that's disgusting. Yep. Actually, I couldn't think of nothing worse than going to a party, enjoying yourself, sunrise, and then a bunch of terrorists come and kill you and your mates. That is not acceptable behaviour in any type of wartime or any type of resistance movement or anything like that. And that includes the rest. Videos are disgusting for anyone to go out and protest that the Palestinian protest on that day, just absolutely disgusting. And so he's
Friends of Israel were having their
we're
having their memorial gathering in Glasgow.
Yeah,
and they were drowned out by pro-Palestine.
It's disgusting.
It is disgusting.
Really disgusting people. And if these people, I'll mention this a wee bit later, it's that they are, they're just patsies for this ongoing global war, almost in a way.
Yeah.
It's a Cold War, not a type of Cold War. Well, it's a hot.
It's much so, and this is why this stuff today about one of the MI5 guys saying, look, don't underestimate the extent to which Russia is trying to disrupt British life. Russia and Iran, they said exactly as we talked about last week. That does happen. This is not conspiracy theory. It happened in the 70s when they tried to damage the UK's industrial output. It is certainly happening now. I guarantee you that. I mean,
we saw that last week in the thing about the accounts,
Iranian
Scottish nationalist accounts, Iranian people posing Iranian army.
Yep. Posing as
Scottish nationalists, and they've got a vibrant a way in, find that division, and then take advantage of it. And I mean, there are certainly questions about Humza Yousaf, his continuing support for Iranian causes. We can call it that now. That's the thing.
Yep.
His trip to Qatar as a holiday. I mean, come on, be serious. Anyway, okay, Mary's going to be up for our final Zoomer.
I'm feeling a little bit deflated now, I have to say.
Oh, really? That wasn't a good one, Mary.
Well, I would, right, Mark, if you can do my comments. I would say that if we are looking for a true Zoomer, then, I do have a good chance. So my nomination for Zoomer of the Week is Jenny Gilruth, Cabinet Secretary for Education and Skills. And here she is, expertly demonstrating why she herself is in desperate need of some education and skills. She was being interviewed by Fiona Bruce, who was asking her about the SNP policy of decriminalising drugs and where in the world showed positive results after doing this. Can you play the video?
Yes, here it comes.
Because this is something that's SNP policy. There's been another big experiment about decriminalisation in Portland, Oregon, which I'm sure you're aware of. They've just voted to rescind that and recriminalise possession of drugs because when they decriminalised it, overdose deaths rose by 1,500%. So given the appalling record of drug deaths in Scotland, why are you suggesting decriminalising it?
Well, there is other evidence to suggest that it can help, and I think it's important that we say that, well, let's look at the Glasgow pilot, for example. It's not yet started, so we want to take that pilot forward. No, there are other parts of the world that have used this approach, so I think we need to take a public health approach.
Where has it worked?
Well, look, Fiona, I think we need to take a public health approach.
I couldn't find anywhere where it's actually reduced drug consumption.
Our approach to tackling drug use in Scotland has been overtly criminal in the past, and that is the problem. So,
okay, but I'm just suggesting if you want to decriminalise it, presumably that's because you think it works. I was just wondering where has it worked?
Well, we want to test it in Glasgow to see how we can better support families and those people who have suffered from drug use for generations, Fiona. And I think taking a more public health approach to this is the right thing to do, not criminalising people, because we know it's harmed families in Scotland for generations. So this isn't a Scotland unique problem. We look, of course, at
I'm not suggesting it is. I was just wondering why you thought decriminalisation was a good idea given what we've seen in other countries. But Andrew?
Well, it's not a Scotland unique.
Right, okay, very good. Mary, don't do the chat things when
I didn't see you doing any. So.
Yeah, I was doing them. I did them. And then we both
we're
all over the place.
We can fight each other in the comments.
Yes, okay.
Right, okay.
Right.
So
good.
basically we saw there is Portland, Oregon decriminalised drugs and saw a 1,500% increase in overdose deaths. And Jenny can't name any study or any place where decriminalising drugs has worked to bring down drug deaths. So basically, I don't think they actually care about people dying from drugs. They just don't want those people taking up beds in prisons because there's a prison emergency as well, and they're having to let all the prisoners out. So it's got nothing to do with actually helping people who are in possession of drugs or taking drugs. Anyway, this is typical of the nationalists. They roll out policies with absolutely no research and no idea of the consequences. And then when bad things happen, they defend the policies to the death.
Yep.
We've seen that with the alcohol minimum unit pricing policy, which just hurts regular drinkers, makes supermarkets richer, and does absolutely nothing to stop people dying of alcohol. Or rent controls, where rent increases in Scotland are the highest in the UK, and there are far fewer properties available because landlords and builders are just giving up. And Jenny Gilruth just keeps spouting inane rubbish out of her mouth, thinking people will buy her stupid, nonsensical arguments. But they don't, Jenny, and you just epitomise a typical SNP Zoomer.
Well said.
I think the thing is that in that clip, I didn't watch it beforehand. Fiona Bruce says, yeah, but their deaths are up 1,500. And Gilruth goes, yeah, that's why we've got to try it in Glasgow. You're like, what?
We haven't got enough of deaths in Glasgow. We'll give it a try.
That's what it sounds like. It's like,
well, that's what she said.
This will kill off all the addicts. All right. Okay, good. There's a win there. That's what it feels like. Anyway, apparently it's me to decide. And although Susan Aitken is a bit of a Zoomer, I think it's not really Zoomerish. Now, it's between these two. Humza Yousaf. It was pretty good. And while that was on, I was thinking that was the one I was going to choose.
And a lot of people were voting for it too.
Were they? Yes. Yeah. Ungrateful folk. That's terrible. How do we elect? Scots elect these people? Can you not see it? I don't know. Anyway, but I think I have to go to Mary. Because Jenny Gilruth, that whole thing, as I said, they're of the but didn't they? All those people die? Yeah, that's why we're going to try it.
That's why we're trying it in Glasgow.
When she was asked, literally when she was asked, you saw it there. Fiona said, so they're stopping it in Portland, Oregon, because drug deaths there went up by 1,500%. She went, yeah. So yeah, we're going to try in Glasgow. You're listening. It's just unbelievable, really.
It's quite amusing. It's sad.
Maybe she doesn't like
it's sad
Glasgow
because the problem is that actually people do need help.
Yeah.
And also there is the people who need help need help.
Yes.
Right. That's the quick point about it. Whether you use drugs or not, there are problem drug users. Loads of people use drugs and they're not problems. I mean, I include alcohol in that as well. Loads of people do that. Right. And okay, you might want to make it easier for them, but it still doesn't help the people who have a problem.
Exactly right. Exactly.
It actually makes it worse for them to some extent. Has been proven, and it all sounds like a good idea until your friends die of drugs, as quite a few of our friends sadly have.
So sad.
Right, good to win there, Mary. We're so happy to have you on the show every week with us. And Scotland's number one politics chat from an anti-nationalist perspective. You do not get this anywhere else. Tell your friends. Okay, we'll see you same time, same place next Wednesday. I must not forget that bit here. Okay, my thought for the week is a question based on last week's discussion about Iranian accounts posing as Scottish nationalists to try and break up the UK and gain support for Iran by posting all kinds of memes about Scottish independence and putting ones about Palestine and how awful that is in between them. Anyway, if you haven't seen that, please go back and check out last week's episode. But the question is Scottish nationalism just a front for foreign governments to break up the UK? In some ways, it definitely seems that way, and it's like something we'd like you to think about as you go forward. I'd like to say a huge thank you to everyone for watching. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Daz, all the other people who, Paul, and everyone there, Stephen, as well. A huge thank you to Mary and to David as well for co-hosting.
And thank you, everyone, for the comments.
Yep, great stuff, guys. The interaction's fantastic as always. And one of these days I will win Zoomer.
Right. Well, it was close.
Yeah, it was a near thing there, David.
It was
very,
very close
very
there.
close.
But Jenny Gilruth, shouty Jenny, it's just her face. It just looks so.
Oh, I know. Really. When her eyes go down, she realises she's got no answer. This is serious stuff. Really, it shouldn't be left to someone like that.
Right. So we'll see you all again next week. Thank you very much. Thank you, Gillian. Take care.